Chapter 2. Ixnay on the Oliache, Colin suggested as he pointed to Michael's baster furiously puffing away. Right. Okay, we'll give it a minute, Claire agreed with a sigh. She pried Michael's other hand open and put the container of fish food in it. Space was the one thing she could give him that she knew he always appreciated. Colin loosened his tie. The meeting was all PR damage control. I can't get much more out of anyone right now. It's too hot. Dad isn't returning my calls. Not that he usually does. Still, I think I've already been cut out of the loop. Don't worry, though. I've got a few friends at corporate. Colin reassured her. Thanks, Claire said, and left the two of them standing at the fish tank. She walked across the room, leaned against Colin's desk, and folded her arms. The aroma of freshly brewed coffee seeped beneath the door as Claire stared at one of Colin's paintings. It was part of their morning routine, drinking coffee with Colin in his office and a little Irish coffee on their days off. But today caffeine was the last thing she needed. The painting was a prison, entirely made of stained glass. In his spare time, Colin painted haunting images of stained glass lit from within. Everybody's alive this morning. It's a miracle, he announced as he crouched down in front of his built-in aquarium for a second head count. Michael placed the can of fish food on top of the tank. Colin stood up and straightened an Ansel Adams print of Denali National Park before walking over to his desk. He glanced back at Michael for a second to gauge his anxiety level via the baster, before sitting down behind his desk. Colin looked Claire up and down. Fabulous suit. New? Yeah. You don't think the pants are too long? No, they're perfect with those shoes. Claire remembered dressing for work and thinking this exchange would be more fun. Colin's phone rang and he reached for it. Hey, Marty, he said as he checked his email. I know, I'm still working on it. I'll call you as soon as I can. As soon as I talk to Sherman. Get his input. Okay, super. Colin hung up. Why today? If it weren't crazy enough with the deals in Dallas closing. Maybe that's why she did it tonight, or last night. She knew it would be nuts around here today, Claire replied, raking her fingers through her hair. She pulled her phone out. Who are you calling? Paul. I'd wait till we know more. Voicemail. He's still in surgery. Any good ones today? I don't know. I can't remember. I think he might have said something about a rotator cuff. She picked up Colin's Alaskan snow globe with the moose inside, gave it a good shake, and set it back down. I was hoping for something gorier, Colin replied. Sorry to disappoint. Why did I have to give her my password? Colin lowered his voice. She had a way of making everything seem simple. Hey, has he ever been there when they found something really freakish, like a partially developed fetus in somebody's chest or something? Good God, Colin, do you mind? My life is falling apart here. With teeth and hair and tiny little, he wriggled his fingers like spiders. Just stop. It's not going to work this time. I'm going to obsess about the crisis at hand, and you can't stop me. You underestimate me. What about a foreign object, like some bizarre alien implant? Not today, she considered texting Julia again, but decided it was futile. Can't you just try your dad again real quick? She pleaded. He knows we tell each other everything. He won't let me near this. We can't do anything but wait. Unfortunately, it's their move. Just play it cool. So what about removing deformities? You know, extra appendages and stuff. How long ago did you talk to Manila Corporate? Right before you came in. Surely he's seen an extra nipple or toe at some point. Claire let out a sigh as she paced. He's smart enough to leave those stories at work. Besides, he's just the anesthesiologist. Still, I bet he's seen some crazy shit. Does he still whisper encouraging things to patients during surgery? Colin asked as he stood up and cinched his tie. Claire massaged her temples, looked up at Colin and smiled. Baster's cooling off. She whispered and walked over to Michael. Are you going to be Chef Boyardee again for the Halloween breakfast tomorrow? That was a fun costume. Michael didn't answer. He hummed along with the filtration system, his eyes fixated on a bright yellow fish. Michael, did you work late with Julia last night? Dad says it's dangerous to ride my bike at night. He abruptly turned, strode over to Colin's desk, grabbed his bag of coins, announcing, "Time to count my change." His hand was turning the knob in a flash. "Oh, I forgot," Claire said as she reached him and gently closed the door. Michael reminded her, "First feed fish, and then the money machine." "You're right, I did say that, but I forgot the change counter's broken, hon." "The money machine is broken, it's broken," he repeated, amping up the baster again. "It's okay, Michael. I bet you have $3.78 in there. You worked late last night, so you probably didn't find any more change since yesterday's count." "It's broken, it's broken," Michael chanted as he paced around the room. There was a knock at the door. It was Marilyn. She pretended to pick a piece of lint off her blazer to avoid making eye contact with Claire and Colin. "Time to go home, Michael," she said in a sickly sweet tone as she motioned for him to follow her. "I have to work," Michael protested. Claire attempted to comfort Michael as she followed them down the hall to HR. "I think your dad's going to take you to the grocery store to count your change. Then you can ride your bike the rest of the day and maybe find some more. We can count it tomorrow." Marilyn stopped and turned. She shot Claire a look that said, "Don't count on it." "I'll take it from here, Claire." Stunned, Claire stopped following them. Marilyn and Michael continued down the hall to Human Resources, where Claire imagined Sal Vanesco anxiously waiting in one of the pink plastic reception chairs. She wanted to talk to him, to reassure him this would all get straightened out. Sal and Michael were like family. Claire's face felt hot. She turned toward Colin's office. He stood in the doorway and motioned for her to come back. He looked like a 1940s Hollywood film star in his classic black suit with his slicked back hair and dark eyes. Her hand reached for her necklace again. She was twisting the silver tube, seeking comfort, when a memory struck her so hard her chest ached. Fuming, she stormed back to Colin's office. He gave her plenty of leeway and closed the door behind her. "What?" "Not the crypt keeper. Don't let her get to you. You know they removed her humanity during her last facelift." "Not Marilyn. Julia. She planned it, Colin. I think Julia may have been planning this for a very long time." "I'm going to be sick," she said and looked around for a wastebasket. "Sit down," Colin urged her as he pulled his chair over to her. "Breathe, Claire." He pulled a wastebasket out from under his desk and placed it at her feet. "My necklace," she said as she sat down. "She used it." "What are you talking about?" Colin crouched down beside her. "The first week she was here, she asked me about it. She said she'd seen me touching it. I was kind of hesitant because, I told her it contained some of my grandmother's ashes. You know how some people get creeped out when I tell them what it is. But Julia asked me to follow her to her office. She pulled this white ceramic heart-shaped box off her bookshelf and handed it to me. I remember that box. I assumed it held condoms." Claire rolled her eyes and continued. "She told me to open it. Inside it were these burgundy black dried-up rose petals. She told me this story about her dad giving her a single rose on the day of her first piano recital. She said he'd always wanted to play, and that despite being unemployed, he'd somehow managed to get her this old piano and even bartered firewood for some lessons. Anyway, she said he died a few weeks later." "Complete crap," Colin replied. "I totally bought it. I'm such an idiot." "I think most people would have fallen for that one. It's pretty good." "It's just so devious. I can barely wrap my mind around it. She suspected my necklace was a deeply personal memento and created one of her own just to get close to me? How creepy is that?" "Uber creepy." "She was entertaining, I'll give her that, with her tramp wear, travel adventures, and sexcapades. But God knows every girl needs a real girlfriend with ovaries and everything. So I just stepped back and let the two of you do your thing. Your claws were always out whenever she was around. I just took it with a grain of salt. I thought you were jealous." "What? Ovaries?" Claire cringed. "I'm sorry." "Don't be. Sometimes I'm catty just for the fun of it, but think about it. She always had too much cash, too many extravagances. Married people, they always assume anyone who's single has money to burn. It's simply not true. Her background, what little we were able to glean, didn't match her accessories, and you know it. Coming from Vegas, somehow it seemed entirely possible she had plenty of money. She probably did, but not from an honest day's work. Claire chewed on her lower lip and frowned. I've got to go. I can't keep hiding in here. I've got work to do. I'm going back to my office. Do you think you can find out any more while I run the morning reports? If they let you run them, Colin gently reminded her. I can't believe this is happening. I know. She's probably choking on a dirt casserole somewhere in DeKalb. Colin? Well, I don't think she was bright enough to pull it off by herself. I can't even think about that. Do you know how many times she's been in my home? How many gifts she's given the girls? Mostly inappropriate, I might add. Like what? Colin's feathers ruffled. Oh, let's see. She gave Em a gun that shot disappearing ink. That one made it to the garbage in record time. Luckily, Anna wouldn't be caught dead in a leather corset. She's into goth, not domination. Where on earth is a 14-year-old girl supposed to wear something like that? Hell's Angels Renaissance Fair? Claire rolled her eyes and shook her head. She stayed with us when her condo was being remodeled. She used to pick Em up from school for me sometimes and bring her back to the bank until I finished work. I recall volunteering for that detail. Colin acted as if he were picking something off his tie. I know, but she was sort of a surrogate aunt for the girls. I wanted to be the surrogate aunt, he said, looking Claire in the eye, folding his arms. You are. The girls love you. The girls... Colin, I could go to prison if she... Seriously, Claire, we're going to get you an excellent attorney. Frank and I have several friends who can handle this. I've already told him to make some calls. He's on it. He placed his hands on her shoulders. Come on, everything's going to be fine. You haven't done anything wrong. You've got to relax. You're going to move very slowly and very carefully. I guarantee it. Okay, Claire said with a sniffle. I just wish everyone would stop looking at me like I drove the getaway car. Buck up, Buttercup. You look stunning in that suit, and they're putting up new smoking tents today, he said as he followed her to the door. We don't smoke. Yeah, but we could start. It'll be fun. We can take smoke breaks and gossip. Since when do you need a smoke break to gossip? Well, let's just say a little prayer that it's a hot young crew of Latino men putting up the tent today. I already said my hot young Latino men prayer first thing this morning. Ah, now there's the old Claire, Colin said as his phone rang. I've got to get that. Hang in there. I promise I'll tell you as soon as I hear anything. Claire's mouth was so dry she could barely swallow. She wanted to stop in the break room for a Diet Coke, but the thought of sharing such close quarters with any of their associates made her uneasy. What if they start asking me questions? What should I say? I don't know anything more than anyone else. Probably less. What if I say something I'll regret later? What if they just stare at me and whisper and no one even speaks to me? Her mind could barely finish one awful scenario before it raced on to the next. Claire kept her head down, making eye contact with no one. She slipped into her cubicle, sat down at her desk, and tried to shake off the excess adrenaline through her hands before she began to type. Within seconds, her company email was open, and right at the top of her inbox was an email marked urgent from her manager, Inez. It read, I've run the morning reports. You're not to interact with clients until further notice per Marilyn McFarland. The tone made Claire more nauseous than the content. Inez's emails were normally so chatty and unprofessional, often mentioning her kids and her plans for the weekend. Claire shivered and began an email to Colin as she struggled with the knowledge that someone in the bank was probably reading every word. She couldn't help herself. She felt desperate not to endure the insanity of the situation alone. Email and instant messaging were so much quicker and easier than texting. She'd risk it until she absolutely couldn't. Did you reach Manel? She typed in the instant message box. Went back and deleted Manel, replaced it with her, and waited. Within seconds, her phone vibrated in her pants pocket. They think Jay is in South America. No way, Claire texted back. Never find her if this was group effort, Colin replied. Group effort, Claire texted back. You are okay, hang tight. Got a meeting, Colin ended. Claire's stomach dropped. How long will the meeting last? Is this about Julia? There seemed to be only one thing she was sure of. She was adrift now. Shark food. Mrs. Cummings? Claire turned in her chair to see two security officers. It was George and Arvin. George was holding a printer paper box just like the ones Julia had supposedly used. Everything went into a slow-motion skid. She could see George's mouth moving apologetically, and Arvin looking like he'd rather be anywhere else on the planet. But she couldn't hear a thing. In her mind, she played her own little dream soundtrack. It's all been a big mistake. We're sorry. We've got the money, and the box is right here. See? The rest is in the safe. She was just moving it. She's on vacation. Punta del Estes, I think. Marilyn has some time off requests right on her desk. She just forgot. Michael's fine. Everything's fine. It was all just a big misunderstanding, George's part went. We feel so badly. Marilyn has given you the rest of the day off with pay. Would you like us to walk you to your car? Arvin's part went. But now, Claire knew what the box was for. Her personal belongings. She watched, dumbfounded, as Arvin and George walked toward her. Arvin took her coat from the top of the file cabinet and held it up for her like a gentleman. Claire stood and slipped her hands, her arms inside like an obedient child. She watched George set the box on her desk and remove the lid. He paused for a moment and looked at her. She was still in a daze. George reached for a framed photo of her daughters at the beach and handed it to her. He motioned to the box. Claire picked up her things and placed them inside, one at a time. Am I being fired? No, Mrs. Cummings. I said you're suspended pending further investigation, George whispered. Arvin said nothing and stared at the floor with his hands clasped in front of him. Oh, was all Claire could think to say at first. But no one's even asked me anything, and you didn't even file a report. Mary sliced her finger open trying to cut a bagel, and you filled out a report for that, Claire reasoned. This is different. The authorities are involved. They'll be the ones doing the questioning, George answered. I didn't do anything, George, she whispered as she dropped a fistful of pens in the box and burst into tears. George let out an exasperated sigh and handed her a box of tissues from her desk. I can't discuss this with you, Claire. Please, just don't make this any harder. Do you have everything? I think so, she said as she tucked a wisp of hair behind her ear, wiped her tears, and closed her desk drawers. Let's go, then. George put the lid on the box, tucked it under his arm, and motioned for her to exit the cubicle ahead of them. Reality sunk in like a knife. She turned to the two officers and managed to squeak, Everyone's going to see us. I'm really sorry, Claire. We have to go to HR so you can fill out your suspension paperwork and give them your ID before we can walk you to your car, George explained. My purse. It's under my desk, she said, touching her necklace. Claire wiped her eyes and nose as she pulled her car in and pressed her thumb against the garage door button. Her limbs felt heavy as she bled the instant she killed the engine. Her fingers found their way to the door handle, but she didn't have the strength to get out. Just go inside. You made it this far. Okay, just a little nap, she conceded, but when she leaned back and closed her eyes, the chatter inside her head was deafening. Claire opened her eyes. The garage light went out and darkness engulfed her. There was no lighted makeup mirror in the old Beetle, but she flipped the visor down anyway. It was still too dark. Her fingers fumbled along the upholstered roof until she located the switch for the dome light, flicked it on, and peered into the visor's little mirror. My nose is so red. I look like Bozo. She flipped the visor back up. She'd cried all the way home, unable to reach Paul in his cell. She didn't want to call the hospital. No need to upset him at work. But she needed him. The sooner the better. Claire reached for her necklace and rolled the delicate silver tube between her thumb and finger, desperate for the comfort of someone strong and steady like her grandmother. I wish you were here. If you could ever help me, wherever you are. She felt half silly, half crazy for asking loud, but sighed and leaned her head back against the seat. WD-40. Strong, like someone had just sprayed it. At first she was so tired. At first she thought she was so tired she was hallucinating. Now, what would it be? A lose of smelling? She even checked the back seat for a can, but there was nothing there. Nana? Nothing. Just the lingering, pungent scent. Claire laughed to herself and covered her face with her hands. When she dropped them back into her lap, her eyes lit up on the maple bench next to the back door. They called it the boot bench because it was perfect for pulling your boots on or taking them off before going in the house. The whole family kept their snow boots lined up beneath it year-round. There was a storage compartment in the seat. Claire's heart leapt at the memory of what was inside. It had been several years since she'd even thought about it. With a rush of fresh adrenaline, she got out of the car and closed the door behind her. She hurried over to the bench where she knelt down on the old carpet sample and raised the lid. There it was. The note still attached to the black garbage bag with a twist tie. It read, "Do not throw this away, Claire." She grabbed the bag and clutched it to her chest before she closed the lid and went in the house. A bark came from upstairs. "Hey, Shadow, it's just Mom," she called out as she kicked her shoes off, knowing the dog had no intention of coming downstairs to greet her. She'd always met her at the door of their first apartment. Once Anna was born, and they moved into the house, it happened less and less. Anna was Shadow's unabashed favorite. The Irish setter had taken up permanent residence in the girl's bedroom. Paul had even moved her food and water dishes up there. Claire headed upstairs and walked down the hall. She poked her head in Anna's room. "Hi, girl. She feed you?" Shadow looked up and wagged her tail. She was chewing on something. Claire walked over and bent down and held out her hand. "Give it." When Shadow didn't comply, Claire balanced the garbage bag on her leg while she pried the dog's mouth open. "Another barrette. Way to go." She stood up and decided this one had been mauled beyond recognition and threw it in the wastebasket, remembering why they'd bought the kind with the lid. "That's a new one, huh?" she mumbled, still clutching the bag to her chest as she studied a large poster of an Arabian show horse on Anna's closet door. The walls of Anna's room had been covered with pictures of horses since she was 6 years old. In the past year, it had reached the point of looking like wallpaper. Claire bent down, scratched Shadow behind her ear for a moment, remembered the bag under her arm, and took it to her room. When she reached her bedroom, she threw her coat over a chair and sat down on the edge of the bed. The twist tie broke apart in her fingers as she unwound it from the bag. She closed her eyes, raised the opening of the bag to her face, and inhaled. Something between a whimper and a groan of delight escaped her lips. It was Nana's old chore coat and coveralls. After 11 years, all of her favorite scents were still intact. Lava soap, oil and gas for the tractor, hay from the barn, burning leaves, and WD-40. It was a magical combination that drew Claire's thoughts back to the old farmhouse. For Claire, the farm had always been the safest place on earth. She could close her eyes and see Nana on the porch humming as she sewed pearl seed beads on a wedding veil for a neighbor. Nana had been a gifted seamstress, having sewn more than 50 wedding dresses by the time she died. She'd also kept the farm up and running all by herself after Claire's grandfather had died, crushed in a ravine when his tractor tipped over. Claire reached into the bag and pulled the stiff coat out a bit. She had hugged her grandmother in the old coat hundreds of times. Now it felt like Nana had given her one more hug when she'd needed it most. "Thank you," she whispered, as she kissed the collar and tucked the coat back into the bag. She couldn't bear to put it back down on the boot bench. She wanted it. She needed it near her tonight. Claire leaned over, lifted the bed skirt, and slid the bag under the bed. She felt sleepy again as she stood up and walked across the hall to the bathroom. She ran cold water on a washcloth, washed her face, and was slathering on some moisturizer when her wedding ring caught her eye in the mirror. Needs a good scrubbing with a toothbrush. She removed the ring and was setting it on the edge of the sink when a catch in her back made her gasp. Every muscle in her body seemed to ache from being so tense all morning. Clean it later. Claire shuffled back to the bedroom, took her necklace off, and set it on the nightstand. She managed to pull the covers back just enough to crawl beneath them. It was the last thing she remembered until she awoke from a nightmare nearly 5 hours later.